Welcome to episode 2 of the Get Better Not Older podcast. I'm Dr. Rob Jones. This is my awesome wife, Shannon. She's a dietitian, where we teach you to move, feel, and live better. Well, this is episode 2. Episode 1 was just a brief explanation about what we do and what we're all about, our foundation of health. Really, this episode and all the others going forward are going to be about me teaching you how to get better from the outside in, and then Shannon teaching you how to get better from the inside out. Today, I'm going to cover the importance of posture and hip mobility. Shannon's going to talk about what?
The importance of evaluating your metabolic health. Honestly, before you even get started in making changes, you should always just see what your body is telling you first.
Love it. Okay, so let's jump right into it. So the worst thing that I see in my clinical practice is people who are elderly with the worst posture you've ever seen. It's almost this epidemic where people, they must just not have ever been told by anybody who is medically influencing them that they shouldn't be walking with their head down, and they shouldn't be walking with their shoulders slumped forward, and they shouldn't be shuffling their feet. So I literally think we have an epidemic of posture and lack of mobility and lack of strength. I can't tell you how many times, now granted, we live in Florida where there's an older population, but I just see it, back where we used to live in the Midwest. As people age, I don't think they're being told by their medical doctors to strengthen condition, to do some lifting, to stay upright. You've got all these people shuffling as they move along. Their heads are forward, and they create fall risk and really the lack of ability to mitigate something out of the ordinary happening.
Well, and then add to it, everything we do now is
100%
the same.
Yeah.
So, I think we're getting ready to get into a worse problem as our kids age if they don't
100%.
learn more about their posture.
100%. Now, I'm not saying everybody needs to, walk around super military in this perfect posture, but we have to be aware if we're spending a lot of time this way on phones and computers, or a head is creeping forward like you see a lot of these old people who can't turn their heads, we have to get back into this upright posture. So I'm going to talk about some ways to do that today. We're also going to talk a little bit about hip mobility, because if you lose the function of your hip and you can't lift your hip up or extend it back, you're going to start these little shuffling motions. And that's why you see elderly people fall. I hate to kind of knock the current president, but he falls a lot because he has no strength. When you are walking along and you trip, you momentarily stop one leg that you've tripped on, and then the other side accelerates because you're keeping yourself in that same pace of walking. But that accelerating leg has to be able to stop, stretch in what's called an eccentric load so you can decelerate your momentum. Most elderly people, unless they train it, they lack that. And it's a very easy fix.
Go through a motion that almost everybody does daily that they could do differently, and then something to strengthen it or whatever. Go through those.
Okay, very simple. The number one thing I tell people with neck pain, and this applies to people with forward head posture, so, from the side they look like this, is a simple neck retraction. You can do it driving where you're holding onto your steering wheel, push your neck back into your headrest. You can do it watching TV. You can take micro breaks while you're on the computer. All you're going to do is take your chin, push it back with your fingers, and just hold it. You'll feel some throat muscles turn on, and those are actually your neck stabilizers. This is like doing a plank for my neck right now. You'll feel a little stretch back here because as you go from this position where the neck is curved and the muscles are shortened, I do this and the muscles are lengthened. So if I'm forward and my head is in this position, think about balling up your bicep. It gets short. That's what happens with these muscles back here. When you do this, it's like lengthening out your arm. The spine stretches and the muscles lengthen. Hold that till you forget about it. You do a bunch of micro breaks throughout the day. Now you start to train your brain to not default to hold yourself here, but default to hold yourself here.
GBNO, Get Better Not Older followers, I'm going to now see everybody at stoplights doing this. I should see it everywhere.
I want to see a lot of double chins.
Yep.
I basically have been telling people this since I started practicing. The best time to actually do some neck rehab is when you're driving. Grab your steering wheel, push against it. Steering column won't move, but you'll push back into your seat, push your neck back into your headrest, hold that until you forget about it. Now, of course, keep your eye on the road. I don't want you to crash. Okay.
Let's just say at stoplights.
Okay, let's say at stoplights. Or if you're on your computer, set a timer, 30-30 rule, 50-50 rule, which is just, or 15-15 rule. Every 15 minutes, do a 15-second neck retraction. Every 30 minutes, do a 30-second neck retraction. Because it's not the bad posture that's a problem, because we're going to get into bad postures. You know, I'm not in an awesome posture right here, but it's how long you're in it.
Okay, so everybody's going to be driving around when we're going to all be
Neck retracting.
neck retracting.
Yes.
Let's go down a little bit further. What about right below our neck? What's next?
Yeah. So a lot of people complain about, you know, I have my traps are really tight, or I have knots between my shoulders.
What are traps?
Your traps are these muscles right here. The big football players that look like they have no necks. Okay, that's the upper trap. The traps go all the way down to T1 or L1, which is way down there. But don't worry about that. So if your neck is forward, the traps, which attach here and go all the way down to the middle of your back, they get stretched, okay? And when they get stretched, the brain goes, hey, what the heck is going on? Try to pull the head back. So the traps start to pull. It's like you're pulling on a rope. It's like I have a rope here and I'm trying to pull you that way. And that's why your traps get tight. So if you go like this, and then you simply contract your traps like this, that will reset your posture. This is called a brugger. So just pretend like you're pouring water out behind you here. When you're out for a walk, do this. When you're at your computer, do this. Put your hands on a doorway frame before you go to bed. Stretch out this way. Open this up, because this will get tight and pull you forward because everybody's here instead of here. We do something a lot called pronation when we're typing and mousing and on our phones. We don't supinate a lot, okay? So supinate, palms up, thumbs back, hold this for 15, 20 seconds, a couple times an hour. Now you'll put tone back in the traps. You'll actually sit up a little taller, and there you go. You've got better posture. Again, it's not about being perfectly stiff all day long. It's about doing this frequently so you start to give your brain more information. Like, you know, when you write your name, you don't go S-H-A. You just do it because you're in your motor cortex. You are programmed for efficiency to write your name because you've done it over 10,000 times. Right now, these people who are like this, all of these muscles that hold them in a good position are shut off because the brain doesn't really know that there's anything different. You have to tell the brain thousands of times to get into this position. And then guess what? New neural networking called neuroplasticity will come together. New neurons will form and connect, and then you'll connect into this better posture.
Okay.
Cool, right?
So I hope everybody's taking notes.
Yeah,
you got pretty
that's pretty
technical there. Okay, so I hope everybody's taking notes. Neck retractions, the brugger.
Yeah.
Give us a third thing.
Well, everybody talks about the core, right? So whenever I do presentations or other presentations, I always say to people, shout out what a core exercise is. And everybody goes, sit-ups, crunches, planks. And I always go, okay, 1 out of the 3 is okay. Sit-ups and crunches are useless, okay? Unless you're a wrestler or you do jiu-jitsu or something like that, the average person, especially over 50, like you and I, we don't need to be on our backs doing this. Because think about what I just talked about. We're standing up, well, not you and I, but people who have bad posture, they're standing up and they're collapsing down into this position. Why would we ever get them on their back and do this even more? Okay? So yes, the core is important. We want the core to be strong because if the core is not strong, the spine is going to collapse down this way. So all I tell patients when I'm trying to train their core is basically take their fingers, find their ribs, drop the hands down a little bit, dig the fingers into the ribs, and just cough or clear the throat. Then you can see my fingers pulse out here. That's called intra-abdominal pressure. That's the truest nature of the core. Tensioning all the way around the spine because the true nature of the core is to hold the spine in place, okay? The core muscles, the abs, the obliques, they can create some twisting motions, but for posture, we don't need that. We need stiffness through here. And I don't mean stiffness like a stiff joint. Structural stability, so core tightness while we're doing a brugger, core tightness while we're doing a neck retraction, and then a little bit of core stiffness when they're going for a walk. So people who are really weak in their core, I don't put them on their back and make them do a bunch of exercises. I teach them how to gain intra-abdominal pressure with this feedback, and then I give them as heavy a weight as they can handle. Sometimes it's just 5 pounds. And if you have a 5-pound weight on this side, it's called a suitcase carry. If that weight's pulling you this way, you're going to walk lopsided. But if you contract your core, it will hold you up. It's one of the best core moves you could do.
But if I heard you correctly, you can do your core as prep before you do your neck retraction and the breaker.
100%. That's actually a good pickup. A lot of people, when they do neck retractions, they'll actually go into a lumbar extension, and it can actually be an irritant to the lumbar spine. Tension the core and the ribs will drop down a little bit, just like that. Okay. Now we can go neck retraction, and as you can see, my neck moved back, but my spine didn't move. And then I can do a shoulder retraction with my neck retraction. My spine is still, and it hasn't moved.
Can you touch on real quick? What if somebody says, oh yeah, I'm sucking in my stomach?
Yeah, that's a bad miscue. So sucking in the stomach was created by some physical therapists in Australia in I think it was 1991 or 92. And all it was based on a study that showed that people who had chronic back pain had transverse abdominis weakness. And the transverse abdominis is this little thin muscle underneath your belly button that runs around to the lower back. It's very thin. So all the research was showing was if you have chronic back pain, you will have a weak transverse abdominis. Well, a way to contract the transverse abdominis is to suck the belly button back. Well, some physical therapists in Australia back in the 90s started using that as a way to brace the core. And then you had yoga instructors, Pilates instructors, and a lot of fitness instructors actually start cueing belly button back. Problem with that is the transverse abdominis is only one small part of the core. If you watch really strong people like powerlifters, those are the people we should be designing our core contractions after. They create they wear those big heavy belts, right? And they create stiffness inside the belt, pushing outward into the belt, like I just talked about before, with that coughing mechanism. Because if one of those powerlifters, men and women now, well, men are over 1,000 pounds in squatting, women are approaching it. I think the women's world record in squat is, I think it's 800 pounds. I may be wrong on that. A little bit less, a little bit more maybe. But they wear these belts, they tighten them up. If they draw their belly button back in and get under 800 pounds, their spine is going to collapse like an accordion. So what they do is they tension and they push out against the belt, and the belt gives them feedback. The belt doesn't offer any support. That's a misnomer. They push against the belt to give them feedback to keep that stiffness so that load doesn't smash the spine down.
When somebody is trying to make sure that they are, because I know that sometimes this is hard for me, because if you have been a woman who has exercised your entire life, you've been told to suck your belly button in.
That's why a huge part of my practice is women who have been exercising. And that's part of the reason I've been doing what I've been doing on Instagram and everything else. I'm trying to get people away from the fitness industry that has really done a lot of good for people, but also done a lot of bad for spines.
So what's something that they could think of to ensure that they're not, like you said, that muscle memory, that pattern? What's something that they could think of first before they start to do their neck retraction?
Okay, so like I talked about first, find your bottom rib, drop down towards your belly button, then move to the side a little bit. These are the obliques right here on the side. And all you're going to do is cough.
Okay, so they should think cough. Check your abdomen with a cough before you start doing it.
A lot of women will say, well, I don't want to push my belly out or make me look fat. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about a lateral expansion or expansion of side to side motion.
That takes some getting used to.
It takes some getting used to, but once you get it, you get it. But basically, if you watch what I do here, it's, and then my fingers push out, and then I just hold that tension. Now, another thing you can do, give yourself a little tap. If you have firmness around the middle, even if you got a little fluff there, okay, the firmness underneath the fluff, you'll feel it. And so if you're out for a walk, I'm not saying walk around like you're going to brace, like you're getting ready to pick up a huge boulder, but 10, 20% when you're walking will give you the ability to keep a little bit of core stability so you can get into a better position.
All right. So that is posture.
That's posture in a nutshell. Core tension, neck back, shoulder blades back, not hyperextending the spine.
And maybe we could use our phones, timers to
100%.
remind, because until it doesn't really become habit until a lot of repetition.
100%.
So I would say, I know for me, it's hard for me to remember all these little things. So setting timers on the phone might help people remember.
Absolutely. That's why I said 15-15 rule, 20-20 rule, 30-30 rule. I just do it when I feel it, because even as a chiropractor, I don't sit up straight all the time. I'll get working on my computer. I'll find myself here and it just feels crappy. So I'll go like this. I'll kind of get myself in a good position. And then I'll just hold it until I forget about it. And then I'll start to kind of default back into that. Again, like I said before, the bad posture isn't the problem. It's how long you're in the bad posture. You were just saying, you should. Everybody does that. They walk up to me and they go, "Oh, Dr. Rob, I'm not judging your posture. Trust me, I don't look around all day and judge postures. I really don't."
Kind of like I don't.
Exactly. People think we do that. It's really funny. Well, I remember being at a tailgate once and somebody was eating a donut. They're like, "Oh, don't judge me for eating the donut." I'm like, I don't care. I'm going to have 6 of those here in a minute. Like, eat as many donuts as you want. It's not my business. I mean, you can do whatever you want.
Okay, you digress.
I did. I love to digress.
You do.
Okay. So that's my side. We talked about I was going to do some posture and some mobility. So we did some posture. I'm going to cover hip mobility here in a little bit.
Okay.
But let's people are probably sick of me talking. Let's go into, that was my outside in on the spine and posture. Let's talk about what's your basic. If somebody comes in, where do you start? Where's your inside out?
Well, you have to analyze several metabolic parameters. You go through these first and address these first before you start to work on, like if somebody comes to me for weight loss or somebody comes to me with concerns about this or that, the first thing you want to look at is, okay, well, let's let your body tell you where you are and make sure certain things are where they should be before we even get started, because a lot of these things I'm going to talk about will trump whatever you're doing if they're not where they should be.
Okay, so give me an example. Like what are some foundational tests?
Well, okay, so labs that you have done maybe at a yearly annual appointment with your physician, the standard that they do is great. However, I would recommend that you also ask for a hemoglobin A1C, which is a test that does an average of your blood sugar over a 3-month period, fasting insulin, and then a uric acid. If that's not in the normal panel that your doctor usually does at your annual physical, then I would definitely get those. So what are labs and why do we do them? Basically, if you fall and you skin your knee and it bleeds, pain, you know something's wrong, right? There's an outward sign. Labs are a way for our internal organs to communicate. So it's always good to just peek in, and each one of those lab values are correlated to a different organ in your body. And it just gives us an idea of how everything's functioning. Are there any red flags that we need to address before we jump in and get going? The hemoglobin A1C, the fasting insulin, and the uric acid give me that really good metabolic snapshot before somebody would start to lose weight. So that would be first. Then what I would recommend is everybody analyze their sleep. So this is
huge.
An area that, we need food, we need water, we need sleep. That it is a big one. And unfortunately, we are all running the rat race, and what's sacrificing is our sleep. And it gets chronic real easily. When we're raising kids and you have babies and all of that, there's really nothing you can do about it. But you do need to make sure that if it's not circumstantial based on the age of your children, that you do address it if you are not sleeping well. It is the restorative part of our day. So it is the most important because there are a lot of fabulous things happening behind the scenes while you sleep. And you want to take advantage of those. And if you're not sleeping properly and you're not sleeping right, or well, and you feel well rested in the morning, then you are not taking advantage of those.
What kind of fabulous things? Like, is your brain partying?
No, it is regenerating everything. Like the lining of your intestines are turning over. So imagine how important that is. If you've eaten something that's damaging, you want that working for you overnight. You're getting growth hormone secretions, DHEA secretions. Like, there's just so many great things happening that your body has said, okay, so this is what you did today. I'm going to unravel all this and we're going to wipe the slate clean so that I can set you up for to your health tomorrow. So if you're missing out on that, you're just transferring bad stuff day to day, if that makes sense. Simplification of what's happening.
So in essence, a snowballing of bad stuff if you don't get enough sleep.
You need sleep to restore. That is the time that your body needs to, your brain, every organ is literally kind of going through a restorative process, and it's all very well thought out. Honestly, your body is pretty miraculous. What do you do if you're not sleeping well? Because honestly, if somebody comes to me for weight loss, and in the beginning, when I'm interviewing them to kind of get a health history, if they say they're not sleeping, we stop there. Because one of the biggest things that can happen when you're not sleeping is that it affects your metabolism the next day. And we know that people who don't sleep end up eating about 30% more the next day.
Really, that much?
And most of those calories are from carbohydrate. And it's all because your body is just trying to survive, because that's going to give it its surge of energy that it's looking for, because you didn't get the sleep that you needed. So it's doing what it needs to do. But that can be detrimental if here we are trying to lose weight and you're not sleeping, and we dive in and you start working really hard. If you're not sleeping, that would be silly. Just, start making other changes before we address your sleep. So one of the first things I do with my patients is go through sleep hygiene. In your environment around bedtime and even leading up to bedtime, what are you doing to work with your body so it's ready for sleep versus working against it? The way we have evolved, unfortunately, is not conducive to sleep, good sleep, because we are no longer really using the sunlight for our light, our darkness anymore. Imagine our ancestors who woke up because the sun came up and the roosters were crowing. Is that what they do? Yeah. And so they get out, and they're looking at the sunshine and they're watching the sunrise, which that's setting your circadian rhythm.
Yep.
You have a gland in your eye that changes the amount of melatonin, which is the hormone that makes you feel sleepy. As it detects light, it says lower melatonin because it's trying to wake you up. Okay, so we go through our day and we come home and we start, getting ready, and after dinner, blah, blah, blah. And it's getting dark outside. And what do? We turn on bright lights. We've got TVs going. We've got computers. We're looking at our phone. So what's happening to that pineal gland? Mm-hmm. It's saying, oh, it's still daylight. There's no reason for me to start secreting melatonin because it's not time to go to bed. Yeah. So the way we are living is making it very difficult for our body to fall into sleep naturally. Mm-hmm. So you can work on patterns that I go through in a lot of detail in our protocol that help you adapt your lifestyle to being more conducive to that pineal gland being signaled it's time for rest, start secreting that melatonin so it can make you feel sleepy at night.
Something incidental that I learned several years ago, that when it comes to melatonin, which is one of the things that the brain releases to help us calm down to sleep, melatonin has an inhibitory effect on the proton pumps in the stomach. The proton pumps release hydrochloric acid so you can break down food. Mm-hmm. So when we snack late and you get that chip craving or the crackers craving when you're watching a game or a movie at 9:30 or 10 o'clock at night, well, your brain has started to release the melatonin. Well, that melatonin inhibits the breakdown of that food. So guess what? That food just sits in your gut, it sits in your stomach. Now you start getting reflux. So what do? You take a PPI, you take a reflux med, because I have reflux, or maybe you sleep upright so it doesn't splash up. Well, now you get crappier sleep. How about you just don't eat past time? You won't have reflux and you won't be fighting your physiology.
And you bring up a good point. I mean, I think a lot of what you and I enjoy doing is educating people as to the whys. Mm-hmm. So how many times have people been told to not eat within 3 hours? There are reasons, physiological reasons why, and that type of stuff. The next time somebody goes to try to get a snack at night, they're going to remember this story that you told. So I always believe in informing people on when you know better, you do better. I believe that. Okay, so sleep hygiene is very important to the quality of sleep, falling asleep, staying asleep. So that's one we definitely address. The next, which, I mean, I'm not even going to say it's less important than sleep, and that is our microbiome. So we now know, I mean, over a period of time now, and I mean, everybody's hearing about it now. And sadly, the only reason why people are hearing about it now is because of the supplement industry is selling probiotics. But your microbiome, you have enough bacteria in your system to cover the surface of a tennis court. And we are literally bacteria from our head to our toes. And it's strategic. I mean, it was meant to be that way. As a matter of fact, you were given your microbiome from your mother when you were born. It is very meticulously thought out to our health. Unfortunately, people don't realize the way we are living as we have evolved are damaging our microbiome. So what does this microbiome do? It literally runs the show of every organ in your body. Is, everybody has heard of probably the gut, brain.
I doubt everybody's heard of it, but yeah, there's
the second brain, is your stomach or whatever. And that comes from, I mean, what was the thing that we heard the other night? It was brilliant. It was, this is how important, your microbiome is. Everything is a gutsy move is because
you took a risk.
What was the other one?
If you were hurt, you got gutted because it was visceral.
Yeah. There was a third one, too, that I can't even remember, but everything... Butterflies because we're nervous.
Yeah, butterflies in your tummy, yeah.
So we've been referring to this our whole lives, not really knowing what we were talking about, but this bacteria is very important, and if you've ever taken an antibiotic, unfortunately, it's like an atomic bomb on your microbiome, and it can get your microbiome off, which can shift your health into very negative directions. So when we talk about things to assess before we jump into something new, assessing where your microbiome is. So if you have ever taken an antibiotic, most definitely your microbiome has been off, and if it's not corrected, it can cause health issues. So it's definitely something that we want to evaluate. I go through the importance of it and things to analyze. And then one last thing, it's kind of hormones and cortisol, which is a hormone, right? But hormones meaning as a female, before you jump into anything to do with your health, you need to make sure your hormones are where they are. And I can say that it makes a difference for men as well. My biggest recommendation on that is if you're struggling and you perceive that something is off, you just don't feel right, you just don't feel like you used to, something is off, your labs are normal and your microbiome is fine, then I would find a good doctor that is willing to order the right types of tests that can analyze your hormones properly. And a good doctor can be the big difference between whether you can get that corrected or not.
Yeah, I know men struggle with that because what's the natural kind of testosterone range? It's like 300 to 700 or something like that, or 300 to 800. And I've had friends tell me that their doctors say, oh, well, your testosterone's 320, so you're within that normal range, which is a load of crap because, 320, your tank is basically 90% depleted.
Yeah.
You want to be in that kind of north of 700 range so you can actually feel like you did again when you're in your mid-late 20s, because why would anybody want to walk around with a 90% depleted gas tank?
And we are finding younger and younger kids are dealing with these issues. That's your body's way of saying something is off and that needs to be addressed. But it could be detrimental to anybody jumping into weight loss if their testosterone's off or their estrogen or any of those hormones are off. It can make a huge difference. And so that is something that needs to be analyzed and addressed before you would start.
I mean, that's a whole topic for another podcast, but testosterone in 20-somethings now in America are what they were in 60-somethings 30, 40, 50 years ago. And that's lifestyle. That's lack of sunlight. That's lack of activity. It's all the microplastics. Again, it comes down to lifestyle and how the grocery store is basically killing us. And our behaviors, modern day behaviors, are killing us.
Then finally, just stress and your cortisol. So, imagine you're out in a field because we're living like our ancestors, right? And you're working in the field all day and you come across a rattlesnake. What's the first thing that happens is your cortisol shoots up. That's the way it was designed. It's meant to give you that surge of energy to get the heck out of there. What's the thing that reverses cortisol is exercise. You just reversed it. It happened because it's supposed to happen, and cortisol is good. We need cortisol. It needs to alert us something's wrong. The problem with the way we live is we're living in perpetually high cortisol levels. You're sitting at your office, annoying coworker or annoying boss is bugging you. Your cortisol shoots up, and then you sit at your desk and you don't do anything, and then you're too tired at the end of the day and you don't go get any activity, and your cortisol just stays perpetually high. That is damaging. You have to understand that when your cortisol is elevated, that's meant to be acute, get out of that situation. It should not be chronic. And when you turn cortisol into a chronic issue, it has detrimental health concerns involved, and it can completely prevent you from being able to lose weight. So in my realm, it's a big deal. If somebody answers on their health history that they are very stressed, we address that first before we start jumping into anything else, because your body will trump you. It's going to constantly think you've just experienced a rattlesnake and you're not going to digest, you're not going to metabolize. It can really affect your metabolic health if you're perpetually high with your cortisol levels.
It's also a plunter of testosterone for men, right? So you have this chronically high cortisol level, your testosterone is actually going to deplete in accordance to that. I don't know the exact physiology, but I remember a functional med doctor telling me that years ago about controlling stress for myself.
And I mean, you bring up a really good point. When I say find a good doctor that is willing to work with you on these metabolic health issues, a functional MD, an integrative MD, find a good one. I know I had one in Kansas City that was life-saving to me, and I found one here in Sarasota that has been. They're out there. Finding a good one can be a major difference in your health. Okay, so we need to still talk about hip mobility, right?
We do, yeah. So, okay, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this because it's kind of hard to do it sitting down, so you can kind of refer back to my Instagram. I do a ton of hip mobility work on my Instagram, specifically hip airplane, because it's easy, but your hips are a big ball and socket joint, okay? They're your main movers and shakers. If they are stiff, which they are on everybody who sits a lot and everybody who doesn't, stretch your glutes and hip flexors and strengthen the glutes and hip flexors, those ball and socket joints will stiffen. You will bend forward. You will shuffle your legs. You will get off of a toilet properly. You won't get out of your car properly. Your knees will hurt. Your back will hurt. So hip mobility is so important. If I can tell anybody anything, if you're going to venture into weightlifting for your health, find a couch, find a chair, find a bench in the gym, stand up and sit down. Have somebody show you how to do it properly. Watch some of my tutorials online, but standing up and sitting down, standing up to get you off of that surface to strengthen your glutes and quads. Sitting down to decelerate, where we're talking about before with the skipping. Once you can do that, then we start loading into what's called unilateral or single leg type work. Once you decelerate and accelerate from a single leg, you've strengthened your knees, your quads, your glutes, your hips move better. Now all of a sudden, tripping and falling, the risk of that drops way off.
Well, and this brings up I'm just going to tell this little story as an illustration. Recently, I was walking through our neighborhood and I found a woman on the ground and she literally could not get up. That is, your days of living independently are over if you cannot get up off the ground. 100%. And that is, she had no hip strength whatsoever. Yeah. To get up off the ground. So this is why we're really starting here as these foundational things, because this is something you need to learn to take care of as we age. Because the second you fall and you can't get yourself up, that's your independence.
It's over. Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, I think that's a good place to wrap it up. So there you go. A little posture tip, little hip tip, lots of inside out tips. Okay, so stay tuned for episode 3 of the Get Better Not Older podcast, where we're going to work on strength as we age and metabolic spanks. Ooh, can't wait to find out about those. So, for Dr. Rob Jones and my awesome wife, Shannon, hope you enjoyed the Get Better Not Older podcast. And remember, you're going to get better, not older, if you move better, feel better, so you can live better. Until next time, we'll see you later.